From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I don't want to live in a world where everything that I say, everything I do, everyone I talk to, every expression of creativity or love or friendship is recorded, and that's not something I'm willing to support. It's not something I'm willing to build, and it's not something I'm willing to live under.
NSA leaker Edward Snowden, in his own words. Today, we'll air just-released sections of Snowden's interview with The Guardian on why he risked his life to expose how the United States is spying on the world. Then, as 3 Latin American countries offer Snowden asylum, a global broadcast exclusive, an interview with Ecuador's Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño. And we go to Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood has threatened to stage a revolt after the army killed more than 51 supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi.
I want to stress that once blood is spilled during peaceful revolutions, it becomes fuel for our revolution to continue peacefully. We will not leave until our legitimate president returns, President Mohamed Morsi.
We'll speak with Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel-Quddus in Cairo. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Egypt's interim leaders have announced a timetable for forming a new elected government amidst high tensions with supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. The timetable calls for ratifying a new constitution within 5 months, followed by parliamentary elections in 2014 and a presidential vote after that. The interim government also voiced what it called deep regret for Monday's shooting deaths of at least 51 Morsi supporters at the military site where he's believed to be detained. The Egyptian military has claimed it opened fire after coming under threat. The Muslim Brotherhood has rejected the interim government's timetable and has called for national protests against the killings of its supporters. We'll have more from Egypt later in the broadcast with Democracy Now!'s Sharif Abdel-Quddus in Cairo. A car bombing in Lebanon has left nearly 40 people wounded. The attack hit a busy shopping area in a Shia suburb of Beirut known as a stronghold of the group Hezbollah. Al Jazeera reports the bombing was likely tied to Hezbollah's fight against anti-government rebels in neighboring Syria. Brazil has announced a probe of U.S. spying efforts inside its borders. A report based on documents provided by Edward Snowden says the National Security Agency has tapped into Brazil's telecommunication network and indiscriminately intercepted, collected, and stored the email and telephone records of millions of Brazilians for years. The Brazilian government will look into whether local firms cooperated with the United States. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff said, if confirmed, the NSA operation would be a violation of national sovereignty.
It is definitely a violation of sovereignty, without a doubt, just as it is a violation of human rights. Now we have to see without rashness or prejudgment. We have to investigate. Brazil's position is very clear and very strong. We do not agree in any way with these kinds of interferences, not just in Brazil, but in any country.
President Rousseff says her government will also raise the spying issue at the United Nations in the hopes of securing new international protections for privacy rights. In his latest article based on Edward Snowden's disclosures, the journalist Glenn Greenwald reports today that NSA spying has extended to all of Latin America. After Brazil, Colombia appears to be the second biggest target of NSA surveillance. One NSA document suggests the surveillance covers issues of trade and economics. A priority for Venezuela was listed as oil, while energy was assigned to operations in Mexico. Snowden's believed to remain at an airport in Moscow. On Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro confirmed he's received Snowden's official asylum request. Maduro said asylum offers from his government, as well as from Bolivia and Nicaragua, show that large parts of Latin America are becoming a humanitarian corridor.
We received an application letter for asylum from Snowden. He will need to decide when to fly here, if he definitely wants to fly here. The fact is that Latin America is humanitarian territory, and it's growing every day.
On Monday, thousands of people rallied outside the U.S. Embassy in Bolivia to protest last week's forced landing of a plane carrying Bolivian President Evo Morales. The plane was rerouted to Austria after France and Portugal barred it from their airspace over false suspicion Snowden was on board. The Bolivian government has asked the European countries involved to reveal the source of the false information. The dispute comes just as the U.S. and European Union have opened talks in Washington on creating the world's largest free trade zone. The negotiations were briefly thrown into doubt last week after it emerged the U.S. has been spying on European Union offices and member countries' embassies. We'll have more on NSA spying with a newly released interview with Edward Snowden after headlines, and then we'll be speaking with the Ecuadorian Foreign Minister, Patino. Lawyers for accused Army whistleblower Bradley Manning have opened their defense at his military court-martial. On Monday, Manning's attorneys began by playing the video he leaked of U.S. forces shooting dead Iraqi civilians from a helicopter in 2007. The prosecution had sought to block the video from airing in court, calling it not relevant. Lawyers also submitted a transcript published in the book, The Good Soldiers, to show that the video had already been circulated before Manning made it public. Manning's defense also asked the court to drop a number of charges, including aiding the enemy. A federal judge has issued a ruling suggesting the force-feeding of hunger-striking Guantanamo Bay prisoners is illegal, but warning only President Obama can stop it. On Monday, U.S. District Judge Gladys Kessler rejected a prisoner's effort to halt his force-feeding, saying she lacks jurisdiction. But Judge Kessler said, quote, "It is perfectly clear that force-feeding is a painful, humiliating, and degrading process." Kessler added, quote, "It would seem to follow the president has the authority and power to directly address the issue of force-feeding of detainees at Guantanamo Bay," unquote. At least 45 of the estimated 106 Guantanamo hunger strikers are being force-fed through tubes. Thousands of prisoners across California have launched their third large-scale hunger strike in the past 2 years. The action focuses on ending long-term solitary confinement, which the prisoners call a form of indefinite state-sanctioned torture. Thousands took part in the most recent hunger strike in the fall of 2011, winning vows to improve conditions in solitary confinement. The fast started at Pelican Bay State Prison, but it's now spread to 2/3 of the state's 33 prisons. California officials say some 30,000 prisoners refused meals on the strike's first day, which, if sustained, would result in the largest prison hunger strike in California's history. In addition to refusing meals, many prisoners are also missing classes and prison work programs. The death toll from the derailment of a train carrying crude oil in Canada has reached 13. A police spokesperson in the town of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, said dozens remain missing.
We are still talking about around more or less 40 people that are reported missing and that we don't know their whereabouts.
The train was carrying crude oil from North Dakota when it derailed and slammed into the center of town. If the missing turn out to be dead, it would be Canada's worst accident since the Swissair crash of 1998. In Texas, thousands of people descended on the Capitol Monday as Republicans revived a bill that would shut down nearly all the state's abortion clinics and ban abortion after 20 weeks post-fertilization. Hundreds of people on both sides gave testimony during a state Senate committee hearing that lasted late into the evening. Among them was Austin resident Katie Heim, who delivered a poem.
If my vagina was a gun, you would stand for its rights. You would ride on a bus and fight all the fights. If my vagina was a gun, you would treat it with care. You wouldn't spill all its secrets because, well, why go there? If my vagina was a gun, you'd say what it holds is private. From cold, dead hands we could pry. You surely would riot. If my vagina was a gun, its rights would all be protected, no matter the body count or the children affected. If my vagina was a gun, I could bypass security. Concealed carry laws would ensure I had purity.
The Texas House is expected to debate and vote on the anti-choice bill today. The bill was defeated by State Senator Wendy Davis in a people's filibuster last month. But Republican Governor Rick Perry called a second special legislative session to revive it. Perry announced Monday he will not seek re-election as governor of Texas, fueling speculation he may make another bid for the Republican presidential nomination. A federal judge has temporarily blocked part of a new law signed by Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker that would require abortion providers to obtain admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. The move came after Planned Parenthood and others filed a lawsuit saying the law would shut down 2 out of 4 of Wisconsin's abortion clinics. Admitting privileges can be impossible for abortion providers to obtain because hospitals may oppose abortion or require doctors to admit a minimum number of patients each year. Thousands of people gathered at the North Carolina Legislative Building for the 10th weekly Moral Monday protest called by the NAACP to protest the agenda of the Republican-led state legislature. Many arrived in pink T-shirts to protest a series of anti-choice restrictions passed by the state Senate last week without a public hearing. The bill requires abortion clinics to meet the standards of ambulatory surgical centers, which critics say would shut down all but one of North Carolina's abortion clinics. On Monday, more than 60 people were arrested at the Moral Monday action, including Janet Holm, the head of Planned Parenthood of Central North Carolina. More protests are expected today as the State House holds a hearing on the bill. The Obama administration is reportedly considering a speedier withdrawal from Afghanistan that would remove all troops next year. The New York Times reports President Obama is weighing proposals to scrap plans for a residual force in Afghanistan after the withdrawal date of 2014. The report cites Obama's apparent frustrations with Afghan President Hamid Karzai. Obama and Karzai's ties apparently reached a new low after Karzai objected to peace talks last month between the U.S. and the Taliban in Qatar. And the journalist and media activist Sputnik Kalambi has died at the age of 55 after a battle with liver cancer. Kalambi was often the only woman reporting from war zones. She was known as a mentor to other journalists who reported from the ground rather than from the press office. She worked for more than a decade at Radio France International, and her voice was regularly heard as a correspondent for Free Speech Radio News, which she helped found. In 2002, she worked to expose sexual trafficking in the Balkans, where international peacekeepers hired by companies like DynCorp were contributing to the very crimes they were there to combat.
Estimates suggest more than 700,000 people, especially women and girls, are trafficked across the borders worldwide. Almost 1/3 of this figure concerns the Balkans, which has become a major transit and destination point. And one reason for this clearly is the huge international presence in the region.
Sputnik Kalambi also worked with the United Nations to establish media outlets and train journalists dedicated to peace in countries ravaged by violence, including in Kosovo, Sri Lanka, Colombia, and Cote d'Ivoire, where the UN radio station she helped found is known as the Peace Frequency. She worked most recently in Rwanda, helping to create the country's first independent television news station. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.